Hello, everyone. This is our session on the FPAS Mark II. And during this session, me and Sergey will go through the methodology and the thinking, how we think about the market reference scenario, how to come up with market reference scenario, as well as how to think about case A and case B scenario. So Sergey will start by presenting the narrative under this, as well as he will think about the recent developments in the U.S. economy, going through the presentation, and after that, I will show hands-on exercise using the Dynar system of the monthly projection models and go deeper, describing the audience how to build the market reference scenario on the example of the United States using the monthly projection system of monthly projection models, as well as to build case A and case B scenarios. So Sergey, please, you can start.
Yeah, thank you, Haikas, and welcome everyone who is attending and who is watching us. As Haikas mentioned, in today's live stream, we are going to talk about our FPAS Mark II framework and give an example based on how we apply it on the US economy. Haikas will continue by, as he told you, to show how we do it actually using our models, which incorporates all the necessary elements we think is realistic and we think helps us to structure our economic narrative and quantify it. But before moving to actually US economy, let me briefly describe what's the idea behind FPAS Mark II that was developed in the Central Bank of Armenia, and we at the National Bank of Georgia were also in the process to develop a monetary policy report under FPAS Mark II and apply this framework into our monetary policy making. Obviously, the FPAS itself isn't a novelty. And its history starts from the Reserve Bank of New Zealand and Bank of Canada. But just to give you an idea what's the FPAS, basically it's a structured framework which allows the central banks to structure, to organize their decision-making process, the whole policy-making cycle, as well as the analytical process around, I would say, the three essential ingredients that every central bank for effective monetary policy making should follow. And these ingredients, we mentioned it many times already, the questions are where is economy now? What are the underlying forces behind these current trends? And these two questions are tightly interlinked, obviously, because one who looks over the economy and tries to infer what's going on in terms of current trends need to understand what are all the forces that initiate these trends. And finally, most important question is obviously what needs to be done with the policy instruments, or what the policy makers need to do with their instruments to achieve their policy objectives, which is obviously price stability, or to anchor inflation expectations. And again, these all three questions are interlinked and very crucial because exactly you do the current analysis in order to have an idea what to do with the policy instrument, what kind of policy to implement. Despite the success of the FPAS in general in making inflation targeted central banks more effective, the recent surge in the inflation and after COVID period induced central banks to move away from their original way of doing policy, or move away from the expert forecasters to the risk managers, because in the presence of very high uncertainty, the forecasts that we were making were mostly wrong, obviously. And the shift of the paradigm from the expert forecaster to risk manager was a natural flow. And many central banks around the world, many policymakers are now talking about this. The good examples are the Bernanke's report of the Bank of England, as well as the recent speeches of Isabel Schnabel from the European Central Bank, and etc. etc. Then the question is, what is the FPAS Mark II? How it really differs, right, from the previous generation of the FPAS frameworks? We would like to call the FPAS Mark II the prudent risk management approach to monetary policy. And basically, it aims to introduce these risk management principles into the policy making. And the very advantage of this approach is that the policymakers address uncertainties, and the communication as well as the whole process is changed in a way to make it more effective, to follow this least regrets policy. And main aim is to minimize risks and support the anchoring of inflation expectations in this way. And this is especially important in, again, high uncertain environment. In terms of the analytical structure, the way the FPAS Mark II changes it is that instead of having one single scenario, which is the most likely outcome, we move towards more scenario-based analysis. So we have the market reference scenario around which we base our case A and case B scenarios, and respectively each case depicts the scenario where on the one hand we have the risks that could induce the higher interest rate path than what's priced in financial markets. And in the other case, in case B, we have the situation or scenario or risks that induce central bank to have lower interest rate path or be more dovish than what's anticipated or priced in the financial markets. And obviously, we have some extreme case X and Y scenarios, and this helps us to also protect ourselves into sliding into the dark corners, as Olivier Blanchard framed this process, where the extreme high inflation trap or the low inflation zero lower bound scenarios. Obviously, apart from this analytical structure, under the FPAS Mark II, we try to implement into our analytical and modeling system the features that we think is really important. Most importantly, non-linearities. We move from this very simplistic depiction or assumptions about the world, that it's linear, and incorporate into our analytical tools and framework the convex-Phillips curve, for example, which kind of depicts the situation and recognizes that there are bottlenecks in the economy, and these bottlenecks could accelerate the inflation given the excess demand pressures, as well as the endogenous credibility. And I think Haikas is also going to talk about this a bit. I think the endogenous credibility is one of the most important traits because the assumption that this inflation expectations are always anchored is not really relevant in or realistic. Even the Lord Mervyn King, the former governor of the Bank of England, in the recent conference in the Riksbank, argued that the central banks need to have the models that incorporate this assumption of, or this trait of, the endogenous credibility, that central bank actions affect the credibility. And this is important because, again, the credibility is hard to attain, very easy to lose. And if the central bank loses credibility, this obviously has an effect and makes it more costly to anchor inflation and inflation expectations. And therefore, afterwards, it's really difficult to, it takes time to build this credibility again. And as I mentioned, makes the whole aim of the monetary policy more costly to achieve. So just before I move to the US case, the one also important question here that the person that is not accustomed with our framework or just wants to know exactly what's the idea behind the scenario analysis could ask, which is why do we need the market reference scenario, or what's this market reference scenario, what it depicts, right? So as I mentioned under FPAS Mark II framework, we aim to provide more comprehensive guidance and communication in terms of blending these quantitative and qualitative forward guidances in this analytical framework. And obviously, the expectations of the financial markets are the elements that we use to frame our risk scenarios, case A and case B scenarios around. And that's the way we want to communicate it to the public, to the market. But just to explain why we would like to have this market reference scenario. So the aim under the FPAS Mark II is again to minimize the policy uncertainty, because in general we have two major uncertainties in the world. This is the fundamental and policy uncertainty. We need to again minimize this policy uncertainty in order to not allow markets to underprice these risks. Because if the markets don't accurately reflect the level of uncertainty in the economy, it could very well lead to misjudgments and this potentially risky decision making. And finally, this will result in economic inefficiencies, as well as some dangerous consequences that we really want to avoid as a policymakers. Market agents themselves, such as households or the firms, are relevant for monetary policy because the interest rates that they consider under decision-making process are mainly the long-term interest rates, which are affected by the monetary policy through impacting this expected path of the policy rate. And this, again, these long-term interest rates are taken into account when making decisions by households and businesses, and even commercial banks, for example, use it to decide to make decisions on mortgages, etc. So, in a sense, having market reference scenario helps us to analyze fundamentals in the economy and also explain what market thinks about this and what are these macro consistent dynamics of the different indicators that are consistent with what market thinks. Okay, for example, if we take the example of the consumption in the US, it's useful to have kind of consistent view what's priced in the financial market in terms of this consumption dynamics or unemployment dynamics, etc. And it helps us to understand adjustment in the market reference scenario over time also. And most importantly, again, we can use this to frame our risk scenarios around it. And this is an effective way to communicate how these risks can affect economy or how important these risks are. And finally, in terms how we construct this market reference scenario, obviously Haikas is going to talk about this in a more extensive way, but the basic idea is to use all the information available in the markets, like the survey of professional forecasters, very good tool like Atlanta Fed's Fed Funds Tracker or Market Probability Tracker, which depicts this expectation of the market of the Fed Funds rate. And this way we can have very crucial information. Like for instance, if we look at the Atlanta Fed's Fed Funds Tracker, we can infer some information about where the neutral rate is, or what market thinks is the estimate of the neutral rate. Finally, I would like to move towards describing our case scenarios, what we built, what is the narrative for the US. And just to briefly motivate our case scenarios, I would like to start from some evidence, what we have right now. And what was like very transparent in the past several quarters was that the US economy had quite robust performance, and this was mainly fueled by this consumption. However, despite the fact that the savings rate were already, and the excess savings were already depleted, and this revenge spending was also exhausted, we still had very strong dynamics in the consumption. And this is especially evident, right? If we look at the GDP decomposition. So the story behind this, we think, is that after the COVID, we saw very large increase in the financial asset prices and financial assets valuation in general that we think supported the consumption. And if we look at the net worth of the households, it again is at historical high levels, and it's at the levels that could support very well these consumption patterns because of the increased wealth effect that the households experience, right? Because if we look at this change in the household assets, it gives us very enormous numbers, like humongous increase in financial assets as well as non-financial assets. On the other hand, however, the recent GDP Now estimates indicate that we could expect some slowdown in the recent quarter in the economy, which could have different reasons that I'm going to discuss later. So again, the uncertainty around the outlook remains, and it's quite elevated, I would say. In terms of the labor market, however, we still, it's also highly uncertain what's the outlook of the labor market. On the other hand, we see the tightness remaining in terms of the job vacancy rates and unemployment, or the vacancies per unemployed persons. However, in terms of other indicators and in terms of dynamics, we see that the labor market, despite remaining tight, it continues to cool down. And if this continues this way, then it could support very well the weakening of the demand side pressures. But what we see right now is, again, elevated wage growth. And wage growth is, we know, costly for the firms, so they price it and they reflect it in their prices. So if we look at the measures of underlying inflation and sticky price inflation, which we think is one of the best measures, or a reflection measure of underlying inflation, and which reflects this long-term inflation expectations of households and firms. This measure remains still elevated, way above target, around 4.3% currently. So this means that there is still some inflation premium which is reflected in this wage price setting behavior. And this is significant risk for the Fed as well as for the US economy in terms of the inflation, because then it could indicate that Fed might need to have a tighter policy for longer to actually finally curb these inflationary risks. However, we have kind of opposite evidence in terms, if we look at the financial bank lending conditions, and this bank lending tightening, which we think is a good leading indicator of the recessions, despite normalization, still remains elevated, and this is supported by the credit and the loan rates in general, which are historically high, obviously, due to tight monetary policy, and this has effect on the way on the credit growth in general in terms of year-over-year rates, and they are quite low. The growth rates remain low or even negative. That means that in time, this will affect the consumption as well as the economic activity in general, and this could result again in weakening of the demand side pressures, which could be reflected in the recent estimate of GDP Now, which shows some expected weakening in the GDP growth compared to other quarters. And finally, the market expectations are elevated again, and especially it's important to look at the terminal point of this expected policy rate path from the Atlanta Fed, which prices that the neutral rate could be around 4. And this is a very plausible story that we also argue. And in this regard, we support Larry Summers' idea that due to this economic performance as well as some fiscal issues, we could very well expect to have higher neutral rate than what the median estimate of the Fed is, which is around 2.6%, especially if we look at the dot plot. Okay, so given this evidence, our narratives for case scenarios are that in case of case A, we expect, we think that the strong demand could persist, coming from this consumption and household wealth supporting consumption, strong consumption, and these obviously leading the GDP growth and demand side pressures further, as well as the labor market remaining tight. And this reflected in wage growth remaining elevated, which finally obviously will translate into elevated inflationary pressures persisting further. And if we also consider that on the international markets, the transportation costs are rising, and this could impact the food prices, as well as we have the tensions in the Middle East. This kind of realization of this scenario will require higher interest rate path or higher, tighter policy than what's priced in the financial markets. And in case of case B type of considerations, here we could base our assumptions on this tightening of the credit conditions, which especially for consumers as well as businesses, and which could very well stop these very persistently elevated demand side pressures and be reflected in these lower demand side pressures. And if we augment this with the labor market data, which indicates also cooling if this trajectory continues. This could accelerate the wage growth reduction as well as the inflation normalization in terms of sticky prices. And obviously, this scenario would require lower interest rate path than what's priced in the financial markets. And just as I mentioned, we also construct the quantified scenarios based on our narratives. And on the screen, you can see our thoughts in terms of numbers, what these scenarios could reflect. And we can see that exactly this elevated demand side pressure scenario would require the Fed to tighten policy further in order to curb the inflation risks and anchor inflation expectations, which could require obviously some negative unemployment gap or some reduction in the activity due to higher interest rates. While in the case B type of considerations, again, it reflects the lower interest rate path than what's in the financial market. But it's interesting, just as a final note, to see what the market reference scenario is. And we see that the market kind of expects still the soft landing, especially in terms of, if we look at the market probability tracker again, the probability of rate cut in September has increased. So market expects currently, given this all the incoming data is obviously reflected in these expectations, market reflects some soft landing scenario currently with the moderation of the unemployment as well as the inflation without going into the recession much. Just as a, again, very final note, these scenarios were constructed using the model that Heikas developed, and he was working very extensively to develop a model that incorporates again all the traits, the nonlinearities, and that we think is very relevant in order to do the proper analysis. But it's important to mention that, again, we use models as a tools to help us quantify our narratives, and we obviously apply a lot of judgment in the process. This was all from my side, and I would like to hand over the floor to Haikas, who discuss in more details what we do, how we do, and well as speak a bit about the model itself. Thanks.
Thanks, Sergey, for very nice overview of the Mark II and your thinking on the current state of the US economy and your taxonomy of shocks and how you build case A, case B. It's very impressive. Thanks. Okay, let me start by showing the system which we developed during last couple of months, maybe 3-4 months, and go in a more detailed way through everything and showing you how to use this system to build especially market reference scenario, which Sergey said is very important component of the Mark II. So it's a reference scenario and relative to the market. We are thinking about the inflationary, which are case A types of risks, and deflationary, which is case B types of risk, as well as this system allows you to, of course, build also case A, case Y, and case X types of scenarios. Okay, so before going directly to the system, I want to say that during the last couple of decades, we accumulated a lot of knowledge on working with quarterly projection models, and yeah, and under FPAS Mark I, usually we utilized these kind of models, which are based on the quarterly frequency, and now we are moving to the monthly. And the main idea behind having and the main thing is to make sure that, okay, we have the monthly models, is to make sure that the macroeconomic dynamics of these kind of models, which are now much more more frequent, is consistent with those of the quarterly models, which is very well studied and documented in a series of IMF and also other and also in a series of papers by FPAS Mark I central banks. So we know very well the performance and the dynamics and the economics underlying these quarterly models, and now we bring this everything into the much more frequent models, which in this case monthly models. Okay, we have series of videos on describing the process and how we calibrate these kind of models and comparing the dynamics of the monthly models with quarterly models. But in this session, I want to go specifically on how to use this system to build the market reference scenario. Okay, so in my desktop, you can see the MATLAB and the folder, and there are a set of the dinar files. So in our system, we have both linear and non-linear models. And so linear models, they don't capture the entire complexities of the economy of the life, but they are very useful in some cases for doing some tasks, especially to start with the historical narrative. Okay, because of the because of the problems in estimating the nonlinear models, here we adopt linear monthly model to look at the historical narrative, as well as to come up, which is very important, with the initial conditions for building the market reference scenario, which I'm going to show you. So these linear models, they are helpful and useful, yeah, for doing certain tasks. But for thinking about designing the scenario, in our system, we have a nonlinear model, which is which integrates as Sergey explained, the model with endogenous policy credibility. We have other nonlinearities like the convex Phillips curve, which is much more realistic to think about the underlying pressures in the economy and its effect on the inflation. Okay, let me show the steps how to think about the market reference scenario. So first of all, we have this monthly base history linear July 3. So whatever I am doing here is based on the information available by July 3rd. Okay. So the model has some interest rate reaction function. We have the this again linear model. We have the unemployment gap equation. It's a proxy of the output gap equation, because we have the monthly data on the unemployment. So we are using the unemployment gap, and because the Ocon law is working very well for US, so it's kind of proxy of the unemployment gap. We incorporated in the model also the to capture the macro financial linkages, incorporated the PAA to 10-year interest rate difference, that ratio, which is kind of very closely moving with the bank lending tightening. So this is very important to have the macro financial linkages in the model. We have the inflation equation and a bunch of definitions which are standard, like real interest rate, gap, trend. Okay. Then we have the block on the on incorporation of the market expectations into the model. So we use a different set of information to think about the market narrative of the economy. The first set of the information is a survey of professional forecasters, which is published quarterly by Philadelphia Fed, and you can get this information from the website of the Philadelphia Fed, survey of professional forecasters, and the recent release was in May 2024, February, then it will be July and October. So 4 times per year, and is publishing the expectation 1 quarter ahead, 2 quarters ahead, 3 up to 5 quarters ahead on different indicators. So here, in terms of our model, we are interested in the unemployment. So we have 3 month ahead expected unemployment, which we are defining as a U_X3, which is the moving average of the next 3 quarters of the unemployment. Then 6 month ahead expected unemployment, which is again moving average starting from the 4th month up to 6th month of the unemployment, plus some of course error term here. Okay, and we use this information observable in our data set. So let me open the data set, which is data monthly July 3. So I'm putting here everything which is available up to July 3, as well as some estimates. For example, in PC and core PC, I'm getting that from the Cleveland Fed. I will show, but okay, here's the data on the expected 3 months ahead, 6, 9, 12, 15 months ahead, expected unemployment. Okay, there are missing observations here, but it's not problematic because we are running the smoother and having the dynamics and structure of the model. The missing observations will be filled by this mover. Right. Our database, starting from the January of 1993, and the last observation is June of 2024. And here we have the observation as of May 2024. This is the last available survey of professional forecasters. Okay, so then we have from again the same source, expectation of the PC and the core PC designed in the same manner. In the model, we are using again the same notations. Yeah. 3 months ahead expected core PC, underscore 6, 9, 12, and 15. So, but this data is starting a bit later. So when we have these expectations of professional forecasters starting from 1993, but information and this survey for the PC and core PC is available starting from 2007, and the rest of the sample is missing. But again, it's not the problem for the system. Okay, so that's related to the information from the Philadelphia Fed, from survey of professional forecaster. The rest we have the also block of the yield curve in the model. We are taking 3 months, 6 months, 12, 24, 60 and 120 months interest rate. So 120 months is 10-year interest rate, and here we are using the expectation hypothesis of the interest rate, and then we are modeling the term premia. So there is a block for the term premia, and using this theory, we are trying kind of estimate the market expectations of the short-term policy rate, right? Here, we are using the dinar features to do the macro processing and build these yield curve things. Yeah, and then we have very simply way model the flexible PC, and finally the combination of the core PC and the flexible PC gives us the aggregate PC. And there is also block for BAA to 10-year term premiums to 10-year interest rate spread. So which affects to the aggregate demand conditions of the economy, as well as there is a bit of inverse effect from the financial side of the economy, from the real side of the economy, from economic conditions to the financial conditions modeled by this term. So the positive unemployment gap is kind of expectation of the positive unemployment gap is kind of affecting positively on the financial side of the economy, and this PAAA spread goes down. Yeah, and also we have explicitly expected Fed funds rate from Atlanta Fed as a observation in our database and in our system, but this information is available, I guess, starting, and it's monthly observation. So RS underscore X underscore 3 means today this the expect 3 months ahead expected policy rate. So you see it's missing, and we have the observation on this for the last 16 months. I guess it's starting from the March of 2023. So we have this information, and also up to at the July 3, we have available also information which we will here on the on all the interest rates, both the policy rate and the market interest rates. 3 months interest rates, it's up to 10 years, which we are using in our analysis. Okay, BAA to 10-year spread is again this information available for the June. But what is missing is PCE and core PCE. But there is a very nice source of the inflation nowcasting from the Cleveland Fed, and we are updating our data set based on this information. So for June of 2024, month-over-month percent change of the inflation. So for PCE, the expectation is 0.08, and for core PCE, it's 0.2021. So we are taking this information, which is updated July 1st, and put in our database. Yeah, that's all. And now having all this information, so we have the macro information from yield curves. We have to capture macro financial linkages. We have PAA spread. All this information we are using the survey of professional forecasters and the expectations from the of the policy rate from the Atlanta Fed, which is available starting from 2023, and combining all this information in our model. We at the first run, we kind of come up with the market narrative of the U.S. economy. Let me show you. There are two important kind of tasks to run this historical filter. First, to look at the market narrative of the U.S. economy, and the second, to come up with the estimation of the initial conditions for building the market reference scenario. Okay, so let me run this first thing. You need in your MATLAB type. First, use the 0.5 version of the dinar in your MATLAB, and the higher versions are working as well. Then dinar monthly base history linear, just typing whatever the title of this mod file. So this filtering process is not taking so much time, like probably 30 seconds, so something like that. Yeah, and also one information to you. We are moving all this system of the models to the Dinar Julia open source software, and also it will be available publicly, which is again our commitment to be transparent and to be transparent for everyone. And I think very soon the system will be available in Dinar Julia. Now I'm plotting only the some part of the as you saw, the model is very rich and there is a lot of information in the model. For doing the deeper analysis, of course, we are not looking only at these things, but also at the extended report of the model, and there is a summary of all the historical shocks, of all the variables, and we are trying to put everything there, so which will be which is kind of sufficient for the researcher and for the economists who are doing analysis of the US economy, to look at the extended report and to understand what's happening. Okay, so by running this linear model, where you can see the historical results from the historical filter. At the for example, at the first graph, there is just observation of the policy rate. It's just a simple plot of that. But to understand, is this model kind of useful to think about the historical narrative? We need to look at the kind of estimation of the unobservable variables and think about its dynamic. Is it consistent with understanding of the US economy and the market narrative, or the narrative which is kind of a very extensively discussed both in policy and academic literature, right? So let's look at the real policy rate, and again here we are using the monthly model, but you can see that the estimation of the following, for example, real policy rate and RR bar, which is this black line, or neutral interest rate, are kind of there is a reasonable dynamics here, because in quarterly we know that it's very well studied, but in monthly model it was initially a bit challenging, because, for example, the real policy rate is calculated by the monthly policy rate minus the 1 month ahead expected inflation, And because of the monthly nature of the inflation and very huge volatility in that series, but you can see there is not so it's not so volatile. It's kind of has the reasonable macroeconomic dynamics. So everything is okay to use the monthly models for the analysis, and you can see here that the kind of there is a historical, of course, volatility in the RR bar, but the general trend is kind of decreasing, and it's very consistent to the facts in the literature where people are talking about the historical dynamics of the RR bar in US. For example, Olivier Blanchard is talking about the declining trend in the RR bar. Of course, he's thinking about he's looking at the 10-year interest rate, but it's and this is the short-term interest rate, but again there is this nice dynamics of the RR bar, and recently this is the recent observations. The RR bar are increasing because of the information available from the Atlanta Fed, where currently the expectation of the policy rate is around 3.8%. So, which means that the neutral real interest rate is around 1.8, which is very big shift, and relative to the March dot plots, where according to the March dot plots, the expectation of the real long run interest rate is around 0.6%. But now there is a very big shift, and you can see this very nice shift at the recent year. And here, looking at these dynamics from the monetary policy perspective, of course, after the global financial crisis, the monetary stance went to the expansionary state, and you can see that this very big expansionary state up to 2027, 2028, when the policy when there was a process of the stabilization of the policy rate. Then the COVID hits, but again it went to the negative. And currently, according to this analysis, and I believe that it's kind of capturing the market narrative on the U.S. economy. Currently, markets believe that the stance of the policy is contractionary, and it's kind of enough to bring back inflation to the target, the medium run. And also there are we have some estimate of the 10-year term premium. Again, this is also unobservable variable, and we are using the expectation hypothesis of the interest rates to come up with the dynamics of the 10-year term premium. And it's kind of historically before the global financial crisis, it was around 1%. 10-year term premium, and it's kind of consistent with some very well estimates documented in the literature, where people are thinking about 1% of the 10-year term premium, and our our estimates is come up with these kind of numbers. Then it went to the negative territory. It kind of can capture the QE policy of the Fed, because first time at the history, so in a response to the global financial crisis, Federal Reserve started purchasing the different assets and moving the long run interest rates down. And here very clearly we can see that the first time after the global financial crisis it went to negative, and then started the stabilization process, because we believe that the kind of long run equilibrium of the 10-year term premium is around 1%. It went to the stabilization process, then the COVID started again. This QE program. It was positive before the COVID and all this stabilization thing. Then it went negative, and currently it's a bit below its long run equilibrium. Okay, this kind of very brief kind of narrative of the U.S. economy from the monetary policy perspective, and then I want to show you how to use this information to build the market reference scenario. Okay, so we are running this filter, as I said, for two purposes. First, look at the historical developments of the U.S. economy, and the second to come up with the initial conditions to build the market reference scenario. And what is very important here, let me open this second market scenario linear. Okay, let me open this file and show you the histval block. So after the steady state block, we have the histval, where there are all initial conditions. I mean, here initial conditions are the data on June. So we are building our scenario starting from the July. So there is a July 1st. Our initial conditions are June. Okay. So here I am putting the values of all the state variables, and they are very important. So the state variables are the variables of the model which drives the dynamics of the model. If you don't put some initial values for the state variable, dynar automatically will take it 0. It's set by it's a default function. Here now, after running this monthly base history linear July 3rd, right? There is a lot of important information related to the model property, like this variance decomposition and autocorrelation of the simulated variables, and there is a correlation matrix. It's very big. Everything is reporting here at the common window. There are moments, so mean, standard deviation, variance up to quartiles, and which is very important for us here, policy and transition functions. So all these variables are state variables, and also these statistics, these policy and transition functions, it reports not only just the state variables, but how many lags of each state variable drive the dynamics of the model, right? Because of the monthly specification of the model, like to preserve all these dynamics of the quarterly models. For example, here in the, let's say, unemployment gap equation, right? We have the moving average of the RR gap, which means that when in the quarterly models, RR gap is a state variable which drives the dynamics of the model. Here, we should have, of course, 3 lags of the RR gap. Here we can see RR gap -1, this first lag, RR gap -2, RR gap -3. So we need to add the market scenario linear in this file at the hist-val blocks, put the values of the RR gap for the last three observations. So the initial conditions are last 3 observations. In our case, it's June, May, and April. And so we are taking this information from the smoother which we just ran. Okay. Otherwise, what this policy in transition function means, when we have the system of the equations with the with forward-looking components or with rational expectations. So to first of all, how Dynar is working and all these softwares are working, they bring the system of the equations with the expectation into the state space representation, right? And in the state space representation, so RS will be equal to this constant plus 0 times U bar -1 plus 0.11 times RR bar -1 and etc. plus minus 0.0138 times BAA underscore yeah -1 lags and etc. So these are all the state variables of the model, with respect to dynamics of the model, right? And of course, you can go right, and for all the endogenous variables of the model, there are some coefficients. And by the way, these coefficients are both linear and non-linear combination of the semi-structural parameters of the model. Yeah, so that's I think that's enough for this part. But even for why I'm saying this, even for the professional economists, I'm suggesting you not just to guess what are the, not the guess, but come up with your own list of the state variables. But Dynar is reporting everything to you. Just look at this policy and transition function, take everything from here. Even professional economists can do some mistakes when think about the state variables of the model. It's reporting everything, and it's very important here. Now, so there are state variables. For example, the core PC with 11 logs, right? You can see here. These are actually the observations. So we don't need any kind of smoother to get this information. They are available, and all these things are from our database. So the core PC is 2.52 annualized for June, which I took from the Cleveland Fed now cost. Yeah, then related to the unobservable variables. For example, we need 3 lakhs of the term premium, right? And here the easiest way to go to the smoother is type in command window O_smoothed variables. It goes to in your workspace to OO underscore here O underscore. So there are smoothed variables here, right? And you can find everything here. But for example, RR, right? Real interest rate. Let me close this. And this is the estimate of the real interest rate. But like very, very convenient to plot, to have this at the command window and get the numbers, which then you put at the smoother. When then you put at the market scenario linear. Smoothed variables. For example, we need the 3 lakhs of the term premium, right? Okay. Now this is the last observation. June. It's unobservable and it's estimated by the linear filter. 0.55. In terms of the notations, term 120 amp 0. This is the initial condition. -1, like this is equivalent to the -1 in the Poisson transition function matrix. And -1, this is the second component, and minus 2 here. You can see I put all these numbers here. And then for everything, for all the state variables of the model, and also very important here are judgment blocks, right? For doing the analysis, first kind of initial step to draw just the market reference scenario. Okay, take everything from the smoother and put exactly how it was in at the smoother, right? But then think about that's the first starting point. Okay, let me go step by step and explain everything to you. Here, okay, this is the first starting thing, and the next very important information which you need to incorporate to build the market reference scenario is the information from the Atlanta Fed market probability tracker. So we use the information from the July 1st, right? And this is the 3-month ahead expected rate by days. So here I can see the numbers for the quarters, and I'm taking this information. So for September, it's 5.15, right? And for December, it's 4.87. 4.87, and I'm just filling these unobservables with some very simple process. And it's the market expectation of the policy rate. So I get all this information and put here at the stocks block. But how to make the interest rate exogenous, like technically, right? How to do that? Let me show you. There is a policy reaction function, which is the first equation here, interest rate reaction function. And the original interest rate reaction function, like at the linear model for the estimation, we can see there is some persistence of the policy rate, and the policy is reacting to the expected inflation and the unemployment gap. And there are shocks, the ID shock and the persistent autocorrelated shock. Then, to make the interest rate exogenous, I'm doing some transformation here. Beside all these reaction function, I'm multiplying this by alpha alt fed, right? It is some variable, which is a function of some steady state and the shock. Plus 1 minus alpha, again, this thing times RS Atlanta. So now it's obvious when I'm making this alpha alt fed 0, it switches to RS Atlanta. And RS Atlanta, I'm fixing in the shocks for each of the periods. I'm giving the values exactly what I calculated from the Atlanta Fed, the monthly expectation of the policy rate. And the monthly expectation of the policy rate, and this and also I am setting for the for the entire sample of the simulation as a 3.85. That's the exact number from this figure. Okay. Remember, I set RS Atlanta to these numbers, but also E alpha alt fed to -1. Let me go back to the equation. So remember this. And this is also very useful for level 1 students to think, also to get the technical knowledge on how to build the market reference scenario and what technical modifications of the system they need to include the exogenous path of the policy rate, right? So we have this alpha alt, which is equal to some steady state plus some shock. So this steady state is 1. When at the steady state, there are no shocks. There is no any value, it's 0. And this thing is equals to 1, which means when there is no any shocks, this is 1, which means that the original interest rate function is working. And when it's equal to 1, this term cancels, right? Now, I'm giving the value of -1, which means that this term becomes 0 for the entire sample of the simulation, which means that this policy, the action function, switch off, and we turn on the exogenous RS Atlanta, for which we gave the numbers at the shocks block. That's how it's working. It's very simple. Right? Okay. Having so two things for doing the market reference scenario. As to start with doing the market reference scenario. First, get all the initial conditions of the state variables of the model from the filter and put the path of the policy rate from the Atlanta Fed. So it makes the interest rate as an exogenous path. And for constructing the market reference scenario, we are using the linear model, not the nonlinear model with endogenous policy credibility, because having the exogenous path of the policy rate, it introduces when we have the nonlinear world, it introduces kind of instability into the system and moves and in most of the cases moves the economy in dark corners. That's why it's to think about the market reference scenario. To have the exogenous policy path, we need to use the linear model, not the model for real policy building, where we need the policy reaction function, which is either the based on objective minimization, or some reaction function which satisfy the Taylor principles to stabilize the system. Okay, in having the exogenous path of the policy rate, it's not so. It's not right way to use the rich model for building the policy where there is endogenous policy credibility. So only in the market reference scenario are using the linear model, then to constructing case A and case B scenario or other policies scenarios, we are using the nonlinear model because there, when we are thinking about building the scenario where the policy rate is not exogenous, of course, we need much more rich model to think about building the good scenarios. Okay, yeah. Now, as I said, this thing is a very good starting point to come up with the market reference scenario, but it's only the starting point. There is a very big role of the judgment from the economist to think about any kind of scenario, not only the market reference scenario, but building the case A, case B, any types of scenarios which are interesting for the policy. And here I use a lot of judgment, not very a lot, but some kind of judgments, but specifically in this video, because it should be much more comprehensive and as a short teaching video for our GFS students and for potential and also for potential users of this system, because we are going to make it publicly available and allowing everyone to put their judgments and to come up with their own scenarios. Okay, let me show you some example of the judgment which I did here in this model. particularly in building the market reference scenario here. It's related. As I said, I did many judgments, but let me describe one of them. Right. So according to the filtering, we have RR, real interest rate, which is around 3%. I'm putting these numbers, but the policy stance, right? RR gap. It's 1.57, 1.4 for the second lag, and for the third lag it's 1.1. But I decreased the size of the policy stance based. Yeah, these things is coming from the smoother. There are no any kind of judgments there. I just use all the available information which I have, as well as some information from the markets to come up with the narrative. But of course, not all the models are not perfect, and we need then to come up with some kind of judgments to come to the real situation where we can talk about things in a much more I mean, right way from the policy perspective. Okay, so we have RR gap here. I think I decreased the stance of the contractionary policy because, according to the Atlanta Fed tracker, the real neutral interest rate is expected to be 1.85, more than 1.85%, right? And my smoother, why 1.85? Because it's a 3.85 the expectation, and minus 2% inflation target. And we have RR bar here, which is 1.5. 1.5, which is the value from the smoother, but I increased to 1.89, 1.85. I started initially from 85, then increased to 89. It's a minor change, and it doesn't matter so much for the dynamics of the policy, right? And I increase the value of RR bar because I have the information, and according to the markets, the real neutral rate will be high. And in our system, we are modeling the RR bar as a unit root process. So we need here to set up some kind of to come up with reasonable initial conditions. So this is the judgment, and I'm not changing only the RR bar, but I need also to change the RR gap, because currently I am more or less very good with the estimate of the real interest rate, which is 3%. That's good for me. But that the composition into the gap and the bar, right, or the trend component, I'm putting some judgment there, right? Increasing a bit the trend and decreasing a bit the gap. Then First, as I said, let me run the this market scenario linear to life spread. It's taking seconds. 7 seconds to run. And you can see here our initial conditions are starting from the, it's plotting starting from the first initial condition, June 2020, 24, and this policy path follows the numbers which I put it in this block of the shocks. Right, and there is inflation, which is I'm plotting year over year core PC and the aggregate PC. It's higher than the target, but it's going back according to the market view to the target in the medium run. And there is some positive unemployment gap here, which is at the medium run increases a bit because of the both the policy is going real state of the policy is kind of neutralizing very fast, but the most important component of this kind of increasing the not the big increase, of course. It's but anyway, it's increase which we need to explain why should the unemployment gap increase further, because currently the labor market is tight. Because first, because of the two components here, the 10-year term premium, it's currently below the long-run equilibrium. That's the first component, and then the financial conditions of the U.S. economy. You can see that the BAA to 10-year interest rate spread is very low, 1.5, and the long-run kind of equilibrium it's around 2.1, which is historical average. And here I believe that at the long run it's a good number, and there is no at this point any need to change this, and it will be consistent with the long run equilibrium of the U.S. economy. And because of the favorable financial conditions, we will have the prolonged positive unemployment gap for the at the medium run. Okay. Yeah. And then the 10-year government bonds going back to their long run equilibrium, which is currently 4.85, which is 3.85 short-term policy rate and 1 percentage point 10-year term premium. So this is the market reference scenario. Okay. And again, to kind of sum up how to build the market reference scenario, which is very important component of the framework we are running, the FPAS Mark II. So which is based on the risk management approach, and in that framework, we don't build the single baseline and put all the effort on building the most probable scenario, but we are thinking about the inflationary and deflationary scenarios, but relative to what? And the best reference scenario we think is the market scenario. And then in case A types of scenarios, we are incorporating the inflationary risks, and in case B types of scenario, we have the deflationary risk relative to what we have here. Okay, but this is very important and the critical component. And whatever me and Doug built, this system allows you to have a very well designed and structured way to come up with the market reference scenario. First of all, you need to incorporate all the available information up to the day you have. You are doing the scenario. Incorporate the survey of professional forecaster, whatever you have in your country, the expectations of the policy rate, of course, and the yield curve information, and use some economic theory to think about the term premiums and decompose the long run interest rates into expectation of the short run and the term premium component. Then having the well-designed well-designed framework, you need to run the linear model. So it's useful here to come up with the historical narrative, as well as to estimate the initial conditions of the economy, which are kind of starting point to start the scenario building. Okay. First of all, at the first run, you just take whatever, as I demonstrated during my talk. Take whatever smoother is giving to you, put all the values for values for the logs of all the state variables of the model, which drive the dynamics of the model, and give the information from the very recent update on the Atlanta Fed tracker. Put everything there and come up with some scenario, and then start putting your judgments. In my case, I did some judgment, but I showed you the only the one, and explained to you how why to do that judgment, and how to do and how to put this judgment into this technical thing in the model. And here you see the example of the combination of the model and the economist. So where economist is using all these technical tools, which are very important, of course, to think and to come up with this scenario. Okay, this is the first first thing, and relative to this, then we are building the case A and case B types of scenario. So this is the very short presentation of the. We have automatically reporting also system in our framework. We are after running all these models, then it's creating this beautiful presentation for the public, as well as we have the very extended report for the internal use. Here I put in the historical narrative, which is of the U.S. economy, which comes from the model, and then the market reference scenario is just this graph in the PDF, and then Sergey was talking about the taxonomy of shocks for the U.S. economy. And when we are analyzing the current state of U.S. economy and thinking about the perspectives, what's going to happen in the future, we can think about the case A and case B types of risk. And in case A, we think the persistent strong demand conditions in the economy, which will stay for some period in the future, as well as increase in the household wealth. You know, it experienced very huge increase for the last years after the COVID, and all this increase in the financial and non-financial assets will result in a very strong consumption and the tight labor market. And in case B types of considerations, we are looking at the BLT tightening for the consumer and business laws, and some recent data from the labor market is showing some cooling of the labor market. And in case B types of scenarios, we are thinking about the further cooling of the labor market and tightening of the financial or BLT conditions. And in our framework, we have all these channels because I showed about the macro financial linkages, incorporation of the AA's 10-year interest rate spread, which is very well kind of correlated with the BLT series of US, and the movement of they come very well. We also have can incorporate some. We can think separately also about the financial conditions of the U.S. economy and directly put it in our either case A and case B types of scenarios. Okay, let me but first go here to case A and case B types of scenario, because we're almost 2 hours online. Let me just summarize. And the main scope of this video is to think about the market reference scenario. And in the future videos, I will go deeper into building the policy relevant case A and case B type scenario. And here, just let me show briefly. I have this report M file here. When you run this report M file, it's running everything, filtering market reference scenario, case A and case B. So, but of course, before running this thing, you need to do a lot of work here in these files and putting your judgment on the hist files, as well as put some shocks to draw your to build your scenario. And here, of course, to build the case A and case B, we are not using the linear models anymore. because we don't have exogenous path of the policy rate, and to think about the relevant policy scenario, of course, we need to think about much more richer environment with when there is a endogenous policy credibility and all these non-linearities which we talk a lot. Okay, yeah. You see the entire system, like it took 1 minute, something like that, to run everything. So this is let me go through the presentation. I put just everything to this presentation, and there is a case A, this solid red line, and this line is it's the same, the market reference in the market scenario, and the red line here where we can see the case A types of scenario for the US, and as I said, there is a strong demand. There is the wealth effect is working through the consumption, and also the favorable financial conditions, which here we have BA 210-year double spread. You see that it goes like slower to the steady state, and here this part is kind of creating positive impulses for the economy, and contributes to the creating the positive unemployment gap. And you can see that here we have strong demand condition, which results in a higher inflationary environment, and to kind of bring back inflation back to the target policy follows the higher path. And the next is case B types of scenario when the when looking at the recent labor market data, we are saying that the risk of labor market cooling will be materialized, and the unemployment gap goes down to negative very fast, creating the deflationary environment, as well as there are tightening from the financial condition sides, and you can see the here to build this scenario. We put these judgments on the AA to 10-year spread, so it's increasing very fast, resulting in tight financial condition, which further kind of contributing to the negative economic conditions, and the deflationary environment in the economy, and policy rate reacts like following the lower path compared to the market reference scenario, to give the impulse. You can see the real funds rate goes to negative here. I mean the negative, the real policy stance goes to negative. This the long run neutral. This is the neutral RR bar, and here in this region it gives the positive impulses to the economy to bring back inflation to the target from the levels below the target. Yeah, what else? I think I briefly described the narrative and how to build case A and case B scenarios, and in further videos I will go much more deeper and show you how, in a detailed manner, how to incorporate the judgments and having all these current analysis and the information data, how to incorporate that into the these systems and create your case A and case B types of scenarios. So that's it for today. Thank you. See you